Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Molly McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My guest today is Dr. Latt Mansor, and we are going to be speaking about all things ketones. And if you're not familiar with why you might want to know about ketones as it relates to sleep, you are going to be in for a treat. But not only just sleep, but ways to really optimize your biology throughout the course of your day. Before this podcast, I actually had a dose of ketones from H.V.M.N, and there's various sources that you can get for ketones. You can create your own as well if you abide by or practice things like going into ketosis and how you can create your own ketones. But if you're not going into ketosis on a regular basis, how you might be able to leverage ketones for your own personal use to up-level your performance throughout the day, but also how that might play a role in your sleep. And I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Beyond that, one of the things that we touch on that I'm really personally excited about is this concept of how ketones might be playing a role in our mental health. One area that's really of note is this concept of metabolic psychiatry or mitochondrial psychiatry. Dr. Chris Palmer out of Harvard is helping to bring light to this area and understanding that ketones might be able to play a role in kind of calming brain inflammation in a particular way that might help lead to alleviations of particular types of mental health symptoms. And when we talk about sleep, our mental health cannot be divorced from that conversation. And that is just one piece of the puzzle. Now, anecdotally, many people report and will take in screenshots of their wearable data and show improvements in things like their deep sleep in particular by virtue of playing with some of the dosage of ketones and supplementing with ketones. Now, again, this is anecdotal. We need to have more and more studies, and there are being more and more studies done. So we do touch on some of that in today's conversation. But I'm going to let you hear what we actually discussed. I'm going to share a little bit about Dr. Latt Mansor so you get real understanding of his breadth of knowledge. So he holds a Ph.D. in Physiology, Anatomy, and Genetics from the University of Oxford, where his research focused on the metabolism of type 2 diabetic heart in hypoxia. He also holds a master's from Columbia University and a Bachelor of Science from the University of Nottingham in Biotechnology. He's a world expert in physiology and metabolism and consults with elite sports, military, clinical, and research organizations. Couple things to note, he's a principal investigator of a $6 million military contract on exogenous ketones. He's an interest and previous research in diabetes and cardiovascular disease and a personal health journey from smoking cessation to weight loss. So we're going to touch on a lot of these topics in today's conversation. So without further ado, let's jump in. And I almost forgot, H.V.M.N did hook us up with a discount code. Always love that. You can go to hvmn.me/sleep is a skill for a discount. Again, that is hvmn.me/sleep is a skill. We will also include this in our show notes. Now, one other thing to mention, because I don't think I've mentioned it yet here, is that we finally have a store, which is exciting. And so a couple of things. One, we have a store. It's on sleepisaskill.com/store. And if you go there, one of the things that our aim is that you have a plethora of just products or solutions to problems that have been impeding your sleep. If you have things that have really made a difference with your sleep, your health and well-being, and all relate back to this skill set of sleep, please let us know. We are really committed to making this a robust place for people to go to have steps that they can take to improve their sleep. My goodness. So please check out our store and let us know if there are things that are missing there. We're going to be updating this dynamically, so continue to come back again and again as our aim to see the latest and greatest new gadgets and gizmos or things that can really support your journey with your sleep. So I get a lot of questions around sleep supplements, and I'm very hesitant to just throw out a whole laundry list of possibilities. One, I don't think it's the most responsible thing to do. I really do believe in testing to see what types of supplements make sense for you. And two, because I really truly believe that most of the things that you can do to improve your sleep are behavioral, psychological, environmental in nature, and often don't cost a dime. However, there is one supplement that I personally take every day and that I do feel quite comfortable with suggesting for most individuals to experiment with because of a couple of reasons. Its high safety profile and high rates of deficiencies in our modern society. Some put the numbers as somewhere around 80% of the population being deficient in this one area, and that is magnesium. So magnesium has been called the calming mineral, and some report that magnesium can increase GABA, which encourages relaxation on a cellular level, which is critical for sleep. Magnesium also plays a key role in regulating our body's stress response system. Those with magnesium deficiency usually have higher anxiety and stress levels, which negatively impact sleep as well. Now, before you go out and buy a magnesium supplement, it's important to understand that most magnesium products out there are either synthetic or they only have 1 to 2 forms of magnesium, when in reality, your body needs all 7 forms of this essential sleep mineral. So that's why I recommend a product from my friends over at Bioptimizers. They have created something called the Magnesium Breakthrough. And taking this magnesium before bed helps you relax and wake up refreshed and energized. And while we don't recommend that you go too nuts on looking at all the sleep stage classifications on all your wearables, I will share anecdotally that many clients have reported improvements in their deep sleep trend numbers. Again, I don't want you going nuts on the sleep stage classification numbers on your wearables, but I do want to let you know about that because I know that many of you do reach out on questions of how to improve your deep sleep. So I also love that Bioptimizers offers free shipping on select orders, and they offer a 365-day money-back guarantee on all their products. Plus, they have a customer satisfaction rating of 99.3%. Very impressive. And you can get 10% off Magnesium Breakthrough. Again, this is the same magnesium that I use every single night. And finally, you can get 10% off Magnesium Breakthrough. Again, that's the magnesium supplement that I use every single night by going to magbreakthrough.com/sleep is a skill. And be sure to use the code sleep is a skill for 10% off. And welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. This is going to be a good one for you all. We have a lot of topics to cover in a relatively short period of time, so it's going to be action-packed. Really, just thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Molly. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is going to be awesome. I know you got a whole lineup of a lot of podcasts today, and you've got a lot of people that are interested in the work you're doing. So why don't you just share a little bit about what is the work that you're doing and how in the world does it relate to sleep?
Oh God, where do I start?
Yeah, right.
So I am currently the research lead of H.V.M.N, Health via Modern Nutrition, and also the main host of the H.V.M.N podcast that you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. What I do at H.V.M.N is I'm in charge of the overall research and development collaborations with institutions, with researchers, with professors around ketones, especially exogenous ketones, because we as a company, we sell exogenous ketone, which is ketone IQ, as you can see, all around here behind me. It is essentially R1,3 butanediol, and we want to use it as the most efficient and cost-efficient way for you to elevate your blood BHB level, essentially. My background is in medical science, it's in physiology, anatomy and genetics. I got my PhD from Oxford in diabetes and cardiovascular disease, looking at type 2 diabetic heart and the substrate metabolism in hypoxia. So that's very, very specific. As we know, PhD, you sort of go narrow down, master of one. And, my master's was from Columbia University in New York. That was my first time in America. That was in biotechnology. And before that, I also did my undergrad in biotechnology from University of Nottingham. That was more of a broad scale. You learn everything from microbiology to genetics to plant science to animal physiology, you name it. And if you go before that, I'm born and bred in Malaysia. I haven't left my country until I was 20 and left to go to UK to start my undergrad. I did have a bit of working experience before coming to H.V.M.N in health tech area. So after my PhD, I worked in a health tech diabetes management program in Singapore for a year and a half before coming out and starting my own company around health tech using chatbot to help people understand their blood test results. And that was in Malaysia. And then after a year and a half, H.V.M.N found me and I started working for them.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't realize that background. That's so cool, that the chatbot too. Where did you say the chatbot was?
That was in Malaysia.
Can we still access that? Because that would be useful over here.
I think my co-founder is still working on it. I don't think they've launched it yet. They've been a while. I think he might have other distractions going on, but it's really sort of not really replacing the role of a doctor in interpreting your results. It's more around making people, just helping people understand what LDL is, what triglycerides are, what AST, ALT, your enzymes, your liver enzymes are, what significance that actually holds. I think that in and of itself is a lot of knowledge for people, rather than spending just 15 minutes with your doctor and your doctor said everything is in range. Like, what does that even mean? I think that knowing more means that you can encourage people to go for more annual checkups. People can be more cognizant of their health biomarkers, and therefore just being able to catch things earlier, you can sort of prevent so much chronic disease that could potentially be harmful to you, and as a result of lifestyle.
Really cool. Okay, so some really cutting edge things that you've been a part of, and now you found yourself in the thick of it with H.V.M.N. How in the world does this relate to sleep? Please help bridge that gap for people.
So I think with H.V.M.N, it's health via modern nutrition, right?
Yes.
And what is health in general? So a lot of people, when they think of health, they think of fitness, they think of gym, right? But as I speak a lot about on my podcast as well, it goes beyond that. It goes beyond just going for a run. It goes beyond just lifting weights. It's a lot to do with mental health. It's a lot to do with recovery. And when you talk about recovery, you cannot talk about recovery without talking about sleep. So if you go train hard, you've got to also spend equally, amount of effort to recover, to let your body really adapt to that training. Because when you provide stimulus to increase, either increase weight, increase intensity, you are essentially introducing stress to your body. And this is what we call hormesis, right? The right amount of stress will train our cells and train our bodies to adapt and then be stronger. So what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That is literally what it is. But at the same time, you need to, have that amount of recovery and rest needed. So in terms of exogenous ketones, the role of exogenous ketones in sleep per se, we know Dom D'Agostino have published quite a few papers talking about the role of ketones in acting upon the GABAergic pathway on relaxation and how ketones could be anxiolytic. So not only ketones can give the energy that your brain needs, or being the preferred fuel, at least in the brain and heart, that we can definitely see in research, but it could also potentially be anxiolytic. And some people ask the question, how can you market a product that is supposed to give your brain boost, that mental clarity, but also at the same time relaxation? And my answer to that is that don't look at ketone as a stimulant. It's not like caffeine where it stimulates that sort of energy. It just provides, it's a substrate. It's the same as glucose. It's the same as fat. It provides energy, ATP, to your brain. It is preferred because we have seen the uptake of ketone is directly proportional to the availability of ketones in the brain. So the brain does like ketones and it metabolizes it for energy, but it doesn't act on, those pathway that stimulate you and make you, go jittery and have heart palpitation and have vasoconstriction. So in that sense, you are providing energy, but because of the signaling effect on the GABAergic pathway, you can have a relaxed sort of state as well. So you are having an sort of gentler version of energy, or clean energy, however you want to put it. It's more of a subtle energy.
So well said. And I love how you pointed out the the kind of paradoxical effect or paradoxical topics that we're introducing of both giving energy, but also being able to help us relax. And that can be a hard place for us to stand to understand how that can be both at the same time. And that's one of the things that we've seen people, certainly at least what some of the things I've seen from an anecdotal perspective of some things that people have noted from their sleep. Have you been able to see things as far as clear studies that relates to ketone esters and sleep? More of what I've been seeing has been kind of in conversation and kind of a hypothesis, but I'm curious if you've been able to locate anything there.
We haven't. I've always been really interested to look at exogenous ketones and HRV, for example,
Yes.
and sleep. I know that I've been speaking to Dr. Jonathan Weiser from Washington State University.
Okay.
In animals, they have shown that during sleep cycle, the animals actually upregulate ketone-related metabolic pathways and metabolic hormones. So, in other words, it seems to me that when they are asleep, these animals, either the brain or the body basically tells the cells to upregulate ketones. And it could be because, of the relaxation effect, but it could also be a complete different pathway that really helps with either recovery or signaling anything. They don't know the real mechanism as to why it upregulates ketone, but they have seen the pattern of upregulation of ketone hormones and enzymes, ketone-related hormones and enzymes during sleep cycle. So the whole idea came about. So we just submitted a grant with them to look at using exogenous ketones to improve the quality of sleep, but also decreasing that sleep cycle. Is it possible to reduce the amount of time where you sleep but increase the quality, so you still get the same sort of quality you need for recovery, for resting, and still be productive the next day? And this is very important for military, right? If you are awake longer as productive, imagine how much more things, how much more you can do within that amount of time versus, if you're fighting in the field with your enemies.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about your connection, what you've been seeing with the military and how H.V.M.N has, kind of joined forces on that topic.
Sure. So currently we have a $6 million grant, which is an STTR phase 2 that H.V.M.N is a prime contractor of, and I'm the principal investigator for this project. And we are looking at using exogenous ketones on cognitive and physical performance in hypoxia. So this is very relevant for operators. And this is, working with special operators in high altitude. So when we are at high altitude, you are experiencing hypoxia, which is low oxygen environment. And when you're experiencing hypoxia, you will get a decline of cognitive function. Because as we know, oxygen is super important for respiration, and respiration is super important to generate energy or ATP. And when you have lack of oxygen, obviously the generation of ATP will get affected negatively. And as a result, whatever brain function that you would normally have would get impacted negatively as well. So what we have seen so far in phase 1 that has been published is that cognitive decline got mitigated by ketones. And this study, we are using ketone esters, and full transparency here, we are using ketone esters because that was awarded to us in 2019, the phase 2. And at that point, we were still selling ketone ester, which we now call the generation 1 ketone ester. And ketone ester essentially is a BHB bound to R13-butanediol in an ester bond. And that's the molecule. That's why it's called ketone ester. And BHB is, one of the 3 main ketone bodies that our bodies produce. The other 2 being acetoacetate and acetone. So right now, Ketone IQ, our current product, is just R13-butanediol. So chirally pure R13-butanediol is basically half of what ketone ester was, because we found that it's just more cost effective to produce and to sell. So we drive the cost down. And on top of that, the taste of ketone ester is very bitter. So one of the tasks of this project, so we have about 7 main base tasks with subtasks. So task 1 is actually improving the flavor. So we work with Monell, which is a sensory research center who are experts in flavoring and sensory and receptors in your tongue and all of that. we worked with them to try and improve the flavor, and it's a flavor R&D essentially. However, no matter what sweeteners that they use, they have tried everything. They tried, sucrose equivalent to 7 times in a can of Coke, and sucralose that's 4 times in a can of Diet Coke. And not only they didn't decrease the bitterness of ketone ester, on the contrary, ketone ester actually masks the sweetness that comes from these sweeteners. So and I presented this result at the Metabolic Health Summit this year in Santa Barbara in May. So that was a very interesting point, just showing by nature that molecule is such a strong molecule in terms of taste that is so difficult to flavor. So, but using R1,3-butanediol, we have found much better avenues to improve the taste. Now, granted, I'm not going to say that it tastes like soda. It still tastes, like how it tastes like it works, but it's certainly much better than ketone ester. So, 2 main points: cost and taste, as well as efficiency. We are seeing elevation of blood BHB to, a decent amount, up to 1.5 to millimolar, depending on the dose. So why not? So that is what we did with the military. And so far, I can't share all of the results because, we haven't published yet and all that, but I can tell you that we have seen an improvement in oxygen saturation in high altitude. So we're looking at improved function in terms of cognition when they are fatigued and worked out already in a hypoxic chamber. And we saw an improvement in memory recall, in vigilance, in reaction time when they're on ketones.
So cool. Okay. So a number of people listening are likely tracking or considering tracking their health in various regards, and certainly their sleep in this conversation. And we have heard many reports of people being frustrated when they go to altitude or finding themselves at altitude, and then they see a drop in their HRV, a rise up in their heart rate, et cetera, et cetera. So is there any sort of dosing recommendation? I mean, this is just generalized, of course, and I know you still publish and what have you, but is there, say if people are consistently taking ketone esters, like, so for me, I can share that I'm taking ketone esters at different points to help support lowering of caffeine routinely. And then I'll use them I just had some before this podcast, and I really, really love to utilize them for cognitive performance and just, that boost. And I also like it for kind of a state change alternative. And, granted, different people have different preferences for these things, but I love the idea of using those in lieu of alcohol or what have you, just like, feeling really ready to go. And so if someone is like myself and they're consistently taking this, would you suggest taking more than normal at altitude? Is it too early to say? Any call outs there?
So one thing that we see in research is that most of these research are body weight matched. So, they are either, they go between 0.3 to 0.5 gram per kilogram of body weight.
Okay.
So where I'm talking about the active ingredient, right? Either the ketone ester or R1,3-butanediol. So in that sense, you will always tend to dose higher than the recommended dose if you want to compare the results directly to these studies. However, having said that, some people just want to use it for mental clarity. So, in hypoxia, it's on sea level, then single dose for our ketone IQ, I can't speak for other companies, obviously. One dose contains 10 grams of R1,3-butanediol. Most people feel that is more than enough for them to get that mental boost already. Even if it's for working out, like usually we'll recommend people to take, 2 doses or 2.5 doses, depending on your body weight. Some people feel better when they take more, especially when they go for performance. But for mental clarity, I think across the board, most people find 1 dose to be quite sufficient.
Great. Okay. Amazing. And so with that, would you say, just jumping around on different topics as we bring it back to sleep specifically, while we're talking about dosing, have you found or heard of different things that people have been successful with as they're taking it more closer to the evening? A lot of people report improvements in, their perceived or objective readouts of deep sleep. I'm always hesitant to say that just because we know that sleep staging on a lot of these trackers are not the most accurate, but people will see a kind of a noteworthy shift in whatever algorithm each individual tracker is using. So I'm just curious if you've kind of landed on any kind of recommendations for that.
That's a great question. I was literally talking about this bit right before our recording with my
Hey!
editor, Chris. Yeah, we were literally talking about taking ketones to sleep, because I told him that last night I usually take ketones before bed. So I personally do it myself. And I find that it does improve my sleep quality and my recovery quite a bit. But as far as research data goes, I don't have any data to back it up as of now, but I am planning to get an Oura ring and really measure before and after with or without ketones.
If you want to work with any of our people, by the way, because we have cohorts and everyone has to wear an Oura ring. So we got lots of people with lots of data. Happy
of course.
Collaborate.
No, absolutely, Molly. Yeah, let's follow up after this. I'm happy to send you some samples. Let them have it before bed. And what I find very useful is not to take like an hour before bed, like literally take it right before bed and then go to bed. Because if you take it an hour, so the way I see ketones, it's like an adaptive fuel, if you would. So instead of like glucose or fats, it's more adaptive to the stimulus that you provide your body. So let's say you take ketones and you work out, it gives you energy to work out. If you take ketones and go on podcasts, it gives you the mental clarity and it really connects your brain to your mouth. And if you take it and you relax, it sort of helps you relax. But if you take it an hour before and then you watch TV and then you get a brain start, all the gears start turning again, then it keeps you awake because your brain is now active because you already provided the energy. But if you take it right before and then you just relax or have meditation, I usually do that. And we can talk about it at the end as well, what I do as a routine.
Yeah, please.
But I would definitely send some samples to you and have your cohorts really try it before bed and look at the data.
We would love that. Oh my goodness.
Although I have a slight suspicion that I feel that the anecdotal and subjective feedback may be more significant compared to objective measures. I think the effect of ketones in relaxation and sleep doesn't move the objective measures so significantly unless you have a big cohort. But I know from an anecdotal point of view, a lot of people have reported to sleep better on ketones.
Yeah. I've seen that many times. Okay. So the other thing I was just curious about, and I know we're just talking about kind of certain things that we're speculating on in particular regard. We're still waiting for more and more research to be done. And thank you again for your work in spearheading some of this. It's just amazing. I'm just curious, just when you mention some of its effects in the realm of kind of GABA receptors and in that domain, one of the things that comes to mind for me are the many people that come our way that are discussing their difficulties, whether they've utilized or still utilizing or have gotten off of things like benzodiazepines and Z drugs. So, the Xanaxes, the Ambiens, all of these. And then they are dealing with some kind of dysregulation as it relates to GABA. And again, I know we're just kind of spitballing here, but I'm curious if you feel like there's a possibility that we might be able to explore that might be helpful in the realm of psychiatry and looking at how that might be helpful for a lowering of anxiety in particular effect.
That is really, really great topic to discuss because I actually finished writing a review paper on metabolic psychiatry on the role of ketones, both endogenous and exogenous, and possibly deal with psychiatry. And we focus on three main areas. One is major depressive disorder, two is anxiety, and third is schizophrenia. And recently, also, if you look at Andrew Huberman's podcast, he interviewed Chris Palmer. And guess what? Chris Palmer is also coming on H.V.M.N podcast next month. So I will be interviewing him as well. So we have a lot to talk about in metabolic psychiatry because Chris talked about all these studies and all this research showing just ketogenic diet alone improved the symptoms, but also, managed to reduce all these medications and have better outcomes compared to existing standard treatments. And that in and of itself is so powerful. And I know it doesn't bode well with big pharmas. It doesn't go well with all these drug companies that sell these drugs for, a lot of money. But let's focus for a second on the outcomes of these patients, right? If they have something that worked for them, let's for a second, put that ketogenic diet like adherence and compliance aside. Just the fact that you can just use a diet, a metabolic intervention in a therapeutic way, it's so powerful. So yes, I absolutely think that ketones have a big role to play in psychiatry because if you look at all these psychiatric disorders, like for example, anxiety is just over excitation, right, of certain pathways. And if you take into account the anxiolytic effect of ketones used in these patients, it's a no-brainer. I mean, one is over-excitation, the other one helps you relax. So, I mean, it's the literal opposite. And, just run a study and we'll know. And we also in conversation with PIM as well. I don't know if you heard from them. Yeah. So Zach Williams' organization, and I spoke to their chief medical officer, and they have a large cohort looking at psychiatric disorder. And he's also interested in running studies using ketone IQ.
Fantastic. No, this is very near and dear to my heart. And I think really can be really impactful for many listeners, because we certainly cannot divorce the experience of our mental health and our results with our sleep. And they're so interconnected. And we so often find that now the first line recommendation for sleep difficulties is to look at cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So it's looking at the thoughts and from a psychological perspective. But what if we were to combine all of these and look at the biology in a process from a bidirectional relationship? And what Chris Palmer is doing, I'm so happy that you mentioned that. And I'm going to be fascinated to listen to that podcast. And I hope everyone else does too with you all. I've listened to 3 of his podcasts just recently. It's really a big deal for me. I'm dealing with a very close family member that's going through some really profound psychiatric difficulties, and they're dealing with things schizoaffective, bipolar. And when we hear those things and some of the courses that they're being put on at the moment from the general approach, it is the workable approach that we have on the books right now. But some of the things that we're talking about in this conversation, I think, are what could be next, and very, very exciting. So
I'm so sorry to hear that about your family member as well.
Thank you. Out of respect for them, I don't share their details too much, but it is so, just so challenging to see. And I'm so hopeful to see what's on the horizon for things like these topics of metabolic psychiatry, nutritional psychiatry, different labels for, this idea that we can actually make such a profound difference from a lifestyle perspective.
Absolutely. Like brain energetics and metabolism has been so overlooked when it comes to psychiatry, and people think it's something else, it's genetics and all of that. But now that we are starting to see more research around the deficiency in energy in all these patients and the lack of interaction between the brain regions that can be improved using ketones, it opens up a whole new avenue on treatment options. And anecdotally, like I was on Lisa Tamati's podcast yesterday. She's from New Zealand, and her mom had aneurysm, stroke, brain tumor, and multiple concussions. And after taking ketone IQ, she can talk and her coordination is better, and she can go for walks. And she just literally said it just night and day, and it's like a switch turn on. And that was such a gratifying feel for me as a researcher at H.V.M.N, just showing that our product actually works and actually helps people. One of our colleagues, her mom is going through MS, multiple sclerosis, and she has seen significant improvement in cognition when given a ketone IQ, like taken twice a day. So I can't wait to share that all these different research. And currently we also have another grant in review with the Naval Health Research Center looking at traumatic brain injury, because we know in traumatic brain injury, from an acute point of view, you get hypermetabolism of glucose. It's either the brain is taking in all the glucose to increase energy generation because of the damage and because of a certain blockage of substrate in, so you need more energy to compensate. Or some research show that they are taking in the glucose and shove it into the pentose phosphate pathway to mitigate the damage. Either way, there is an increase in glucose uptake. And then long term, then that's acute. And over long term, the brain slowly goes into hypometabolism of glucose and show the deficiency in metabolizing glucose. Now, this is very interesting, and how ketone comes in is like, imagine if at the event, at the moment where TBI occurs, and you provide ketones to help with the energy demand that it needs to either mitigate the damage or compensate with the energy deficiency. And then over long term, we are providing ketones also to really compensate that deficiency in metabolizing glucose. And this we have also seen in Alzheimer's, where they have sort of almost like an insulin resistance in the brain because they can't metabolize glucose as efficiently. So this is the grant that we applied for, and fingers crossed, if we get it, we'll look at, how this turns out in humans, because TBI studies are a bit difficult in humans because you're not going to get these participants and hit them in the head and see what happens, right? So we're looking at midterm to long-term effects for people who have already had TBIs and having difficulty either with their eye coordination or motor sensors, all these different difficulties or memory recall. And we'll look at the effect if given ketone IQ, what will happen.
Wow, so cool. Well, that is really exciting. I'm so excited to follow your work and what comes of these things. And just throwing out a couple quick things, I'm curious as you were speaking, if any of these you think could have applicability. So as we speak about hypoxia, one of the things that comes to mind in the sleep realm being sleep apnea or difficulty with breathing, respiratory issues, upper airway resistance syndrome, or any realm of that struggle to breathe throughout the course of the night. Do you feel like, and again, I know sometimes we're speaking in what we theories potentially, but do you feel like that is a possible line of thinking that would make sense, that people that are dealing with those things might benefit from ketone esters?
Well, before we go there, actually, I was going to add something on the psychiatry, and let's not forget the anti-inflammatory properties of ketone as well. So, in my paper that I'm currently reviewing and hopefully sending in for peer review, we talked about a lot of mechanism of action in terms of the effect of ketones on BDNF, the effect on lowering IL-6, which is interleukin 6, is the cytokines that is upregulated during inflammation. And even during workout, it's really upregulated. And we have seen that in psychiatric disorders. It's a very high upregulation of IL-6. TNF alpha, that's another biomarker that is often being brought up. It shows that ketogenic diet or ketones in general have a positive effect on these biomarkers. So just to add that on there. And in terms of breathing and sleep apnea and all that, I don't believe I have seen any research specifically to that. As to theoretical, I don't know enough about sleep apnea to really comment on the link between ketone metabolism and sleep apnea, because obviously we got to be really careful here as well to not really say like ketone will solve all problems, right? Ketone is not a miracle drug. And I always tell people the first thing to do when it comes to lifestyle intervention is to really focus on the foundation: your food, your nutrition, diet, your sleep, your exercise, your physical activity, your mental well-being, whether you go for a walk, whether you go see nature, whether you meditate, do yoga, all of that aspect that you spend majority of the hours of the day in, fix those first, and then you bring in supplementation. And ketone supplementation, exogenous ketone, is one of those supplementation that you can bring in to enhance and further optimize that lifestyle. But if you just hope that ketone ester will miraculously fix your problems and chronic disease, that's going to be a problem in and of itself, because we're not trying to push a drug like a big pharma, for example. We're trying to push a lifestyle and a healthy sort of practice. And for some people, ketone IQ could complement that lifestyle.
Oh, so well said. And I love your website too, how you speak to this as you're not a keto diet company. There's an entire spectrum that you're speaking to, this health optimizer, the athlete,
knowledge work.
Right. The people curious about it, certainly it doesn't exclude keto dieters as well, but you've got all of these different advantages that can come from ketones, and you're speaking to this fundamental pyramid of beginning in a holistic perspective and then seeing what this could do to kind of augment your results. Really fantastic. And now I'm thinking we might be able to I love the deep thinking that you've clearly done in this area and beyond. So I'm curious what we can learn from how you're managing your own lifestyle, your own sleep, as it were, and how that might show up with your management with your ketone esters as well. So we do ask everyone 4 questions. And the first one that we always ask is, what is your current nightly sleep routine looking like?
So my current sleep routine, I talked about this for a bit as well. And just to clarify, the exogenous ketone that I use is ketone IQ. That is not ketone ester. That is R13-butynyl. So a lot of people
thank you. I keep saying that.
No, that's fine. Because a lot of people, because I mean, to be fair, ketone ester is the most established molecule that has been in research for almost, of 2 decades, I believe. And a lot of this reference, even us, when we reference, we do say ketone ester. Like, we have been very transparent. At least for me, I've been very transparent. Whenever a study referred to ketone ester, I'll say ketone ester. And there's a study on R1,3-butydiol, which is ketone IQ. I'll say that. So for me, what I do in terms of sleeping routine, I actually started meditation about a couple of months ago now. It's maybe around August. And I find that very, very helpful. I never thought it would be as helpful as it did, but I would pair ketone IQ with U.S.S.OCOM, which is a nootropic that we sell. It has L-theanine, L-glycine, magnesium glycinate, and melatonin. So very simple, sort of ingredients. You can get it off the counter, but it just so happened that we have it. So, I just take it. So I take that, and it's very low melatonin as well. It's about 1 to 2 milligram. I pair that with ketone IQ, and then I'll meditate for about 20 minutes, guided meditation. And then that's my sleep routine. That's very simple. That usually really puts me in this relaxed state and just have a good night's sleep. And then in the morning, I'll start with morning meditation. Admittedly, I should do it more consistently than I am doing right now, because I've been traveling a lot in these few weeks for company and podcast. Last week, I was just at University of North Georgia because we ran our first ever ketone IQ clinical trial, because we just launched ketone IQ, in January. It's not the first ever R1,3-butydiol, because R1,3-butydiol has been researched since 1960s. But ketone IQ, specifically our product, we just ran the first study, and we showed super amazing results, because for the first time ever, we're looking at improvement in anaerobic exercise using ketone IQ. And all this while, whenever you talk about ketone ester or exogenous ketones, it's always synonymous with endurance exercise, with triathletes, with cyclists. So this time we're looking at power output, we're looking at fatigue levels, and it's really interesting data. Can't share too much because we are in the middle of writing the manuscript to publish in February. So look forward to it. And I will definitely host a podcast session with the professor who ran the study, Professor Parker Hyde, who got his PhD from Jeff Volek. So we all know who, Jeff Volek is, big name in ketogenic diet sort of space, Virta Health, co-founder. So it's a very, very interesting world.
Fantastic. Oh, that's very exciting. Okay, so, and I'm glad that you've introduced this meditation. You're finding these benefits for yourself as you manage all of these things and the travel and what have you. Absolutely. For me, and I brought ketone IQ along with me and different trips recently, and I find these things to be invaluable to help support me with all the things that typically happen when we travel, and the routines that get thrown out of whack, and flights and all of that. So my other question to you would be then, what do we see in your morning sleep routine? And we make that argument that how you start your morning will impact your sleep. I know you mentioned meditation in your morning, which sounds fantastic. Is that the main crux of your morning routine? Any other call-outs there?
Yeah, that would be the main crux, really. Sometimes I would have a shot of ketones, but I generally save my shot of ketone for before podcast. So I'll have it later in the day if I have a podcast. So that really helps me. And obviously, I think exercise plays a big role in my sleep quality, because once you're tired, you sleep very much, much better. I mean, that goes without saying. I think everyone knows that. I mean, tell me something I don't know, right?
But I appreciate you saying that, because so many people forget. And, we've been living such sedentary, lifestyles that this concept of sleep pressure gets forgotten often. And, I do feel totally wiped from that really, hard session at the gym. And often that becomes more the anomaly for people. So I appreciate you sharing that.
And the whole meditation process also really helped me zoom out and really differentiate between mental exhaustion and physical exhaustion. Because a lot of times, I think, as you said, we live this sedentary lifestyle and very stressful life, right? When we are really hustling, bustling, and trying to make it at work and in our careers. So sometimes we just feel so mentally exhausted, and we feel that sleeping is going to fix that, and we can sleep well because we're mentally exhausted. But then do know that your body is fully fueled and not exhausted at all. And then there is that disconnect. But this meditation really helps me zoom out and tell myself, actually, yes, I am mentally exhausted, but I can still go to the gym. I can still get a good workout out because my body has got all this fuel and energy, and I can still actually push myself. And when I push myself, I am closing the gap between the disconnect between mental and physical exhaustion. And that way I can, by the time I go to bed, I am primed for recovery, both mentally and physically.
Yes, huge. Love that. And our next question there would be, so once you get to bed, is there anything we would see on your nightstand or maybe proverbial nightstand if you're traveling, or ambiance or gadgets or anything there?
I know some, a lot of people, they like to have white noise or they have like raindrops or whatnot. I actually don't have anything. I am very simple when it comes to that, because I think probably because growing up, I grew up in Malaysia, obviously, and as I said earlier, but I also studied in a boarding school. So I was in a dormitory with 15 other boys. So you can imagine the noises and people tossing and turning. And I'm a light sleeper as well, but I have basically my body optimized itself to be able to sleep even with like noises around, even with people walking around. And I sleep very well during transit. And a lot of my friends hate me for this because I sleep very well on planes. I sleep very well like when I'm traveling, because my body sort of train itself to be able to fall asleep and rest whenever I get a chance, because I've been traveling all my life, going here, there, and shifting my life around and moving different countries. And I think for me, that ability and capacity to rest really helped me adapt to new environments and hectic schedules.
Yeah. Ugh, what a fantastic adaptive nature. Yeah, absolutely. And then our last question would be, what would you say has made the biggest change to your sleep game, or maybe the biggest aha moment in managing your sleep?
Deep breathing. As simple as that sounds, deep breathing. Literally, sometimes the more I learn about breath work, the more I learn about how deep breathing can significantly not only lower your heart rate, but also like mentally like relaxes you. As little as 3 deep breaths before I go to bed, it does wonders. And sometimes when I'm like, I have so many things bothering me during the day, even after meditation, usually after meditation, it sort of like goes off and it reminds me everything is impermanent. Everything is changing, and tomorrow is another day. No point worrying about it and stressing about it tonight. There's nothing I can do about it tonight. Let it go. Usually meditation does that, but obviously sometimes, when you meditate, you still have that lingering thought after. And those deep breaths, basically like it forces your body to relax, and it's really revolutionary for me.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. And more to the minimalism piece. You can bring that wherever you go with all your travels. You got the control, and inner locus of control to control your breath. So I love that. And control your nervous system as a result. That is fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those things. And just checking in, just getting a sense of when you are using your product. So whether it's Ketone IQ or what have you, what does that dosing schedule typically look like? I know you mentioned that it sounds like usually before kind of performance in a particular way. So podcast, you really want to be on point for, and then maybe in your evenings. Is that the usual lineup?
That's correct. So usually I'll have it before podcasts and then before I go to bed. And sometimes if I know I'm going to lift heavy, I'll usually have a dose before workout as well. So I would classify or categorize the dose before sleep as a recovery dose, because there is a study by Haspel's group in Belgium that looked at recovery and overtraining and how ketones can help with recovery. In that study, they took it half an hour after workout and half an hour before bed.
Very cool. You're just making me think out loud of, have you been connected with Peak Brain Institute by any chance?
No, I haven't.
Maybe we'll have to connect you guys, because I just had them on the podcast recently, and they'll do remote QEEG readouts and live too. Like actually they're in LA. Maybe you can swing on over there.
Yeah, please do. I mean, I would love to speak to, more collaborators and partners. Yeah.
I think there could be something there, because what they can do is different baseline QEEG readouts of the brain. And what they're finding is making me think of your work with TBI patients, and what they've done a lot of work with TBI, as well as finding correlations between people post-COVID, so long COVID in particular, and looking akin to TBI from their readouts of their QEG results. And so I'm just curious if there could be some support for both categories of people potentially with some of your products. So really, really cool stuff. It's getting me thinking out loud. And I'm sure other people are probably thinking out loud. So how in the world can they follow you, all of this work that you're doing and the company? What are the best ways to do that?
So you can find me at Latt Mansor, LattMansor, on all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and at H.V.M.N, so Health Via Modern Nutrition, H.V.M.N, at all social media platforms as well. There is our website, hvmn.com, and you can get our products on Amazon as well. And we are also selling those little single-serve shots in retail, Sprouts, in Central Market, and hopefully, many more.
Oh my God, I know. I was so happy. I was just in LA a little bit ago, and just this little tiny cute place, just a little breakfast spot happened to have your shots. And, I was a little run down. I was like, yay, and I grabbed a bunch of them. I'm just so excited to start to see those things infiltrating the mainstream and just being available. And it's fantastic stuff. And just really excited to follow what you're diving into and some of the far-reaching application of this and the ethos around how to pair this with these lifestyle interventions that are often free, like the deep breaths. So thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time, and then hope to be connected in the future to further kind of follow up, maybe on a part 2 down the road.
Absolutely. Pleasure is mine.
Awesome.
You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Molly's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepisaskill.com to sign up.